ਦੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਜਮਹੂਰੀ ਜਾਬਤੇ ਸੰਵਿਧਾਨ ਵਿਚਕਾਰ ਢਲਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਆਪਣਾ ਕੰਮ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਜਾਬਤੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਚੁਣੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਿਆਂ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਮਨੁੱਖਾ ਸਭਿਅਤਾ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਜਿਹਾ ਕੋਈ ਬਾਦਸ਼ਾਹ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੋਈ ਨਿਰੰਕੁਸ਼ ਹੁਕਮਰਾਨ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੋਈ ਤਾਨਾਸ਼ਾਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਿਸ ਕੋਲ ਅਜਿਹੇ ਅਸਲੇ ਦੇ ਜ਼ਖੀਰੇ ਹਨ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਘੱਟ ਹੈ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਇਹਨੇ ਪੜਿਆ। ਸੋ ਆਈ ਕੈਨ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜੋ ਬੀਬੀ ਮਿਲਣ ਗਈ ਹੈ
audience को पूछने में चाहिए तो लोग ट्रांसलेशन की लोड है।
Yes, I agree with this.
I think we should.
Is it okay without translation?
Yeah. Okay.
No जी.
No.
So there is issue of audio.
Yeah.
Your mic is my mic.
Can people tell us whether they need a translation or not? Because it's important. Put up your hand, those who want a translation.
जिन्होंने ट्रांसलेशन की लोड है ठीक है।
सो ये मैं नालों नाल पढ़ के बोलांगा। सिर्फ एक पैरा हैगा। भाई जी भाई ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਗੁੱਸਾ ਕਦੋਂ ਆਏਗਾ? ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਡੀਕਣਾ ਬੰਦ ਕਰੋਗੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਦੋਂ ਬੋਲੋਗੇ? ਕਦੋਂ ਕਹੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਉਸ ਹਥਿਆਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚੋਗੇ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਦ੍ਰਿੜਤਾ, ਆਪਣਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ, ਆਪਣੀ ਤਾਕਤ ਕਦੋਂ ਦਿਖਾਓਗੇ? ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਯਕੀਨ ਨੂੰ ਕਦੋਂ ਤੋੜੋਗੇ? ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਯਕੀਨ ਨੂੰ ਕਦੋਂ ਤੋੜੋਗੇ ਜਾਂ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਤੋੜੇਗਾ? So you have visited Uttar Pradesh many times. You have talked to people many times. You have written again and again. So this time you visited Uttar Pradesh again and you found that the political diction, the language has changed. So can you give us an example which we can relate that it is coming from the Kisan Morcha?
Well, the best example I think is hearing one farmer actually saying, देश को 4 लोग चलाते हैं, 2 खरीदते, 2 बेचते हैं और 4 गुजराते हैं।
How do you relate it to the Kisan?
Because the Kisan Morcha was the one that understood what corporatization, what privatization. I mean, all of us, someone like me has been writing about it for 20 years. You know, when I remember when I first started writing about privatization, all the great liberals of India were like, she should be taken to a psychiatrist. There was so much attack on this understanding of where we were heading, you know. But what is the difference between writers or some of us and people who are, let's say, getting displaced by the dam, or farmers who are fighting about what is going to happen to the land, what is going to happen to rain? You know, writers have the ability to climb a tree, to sit on the top of that tree and look out and see more than just what's happening in your own area, right? And oddly enough, in India or in the world now, you know, there was a time when people were so much more informed. People used to talk about Palestine, about non-aligned, about Russia. Now it's all become chota, seemat wala dunya. So language you can see clearly the connection between the farmers' movement and what was happening. And I'll tell you one other thing. The other thing was that you all know this better than me. When the farmers' movement came together, there was an attempt to understand the contradictions of caste, to understand the contradictions of what is it that a landed farmer, a big landed, gut sick farmer, and a landless Madhabi laborer, how are they coming together in this andolan? And what can they do about the contradictions of caste and class and possession and all that? These things have not been resolved, but certainly they were being addressed even by friends of ours. And if you travel to UP, whether let's say in eastern UP or Lakhimpur, the farmers movement hadn't fully reached there. लेकिन जो लोग जैसे दलित लोग कहते थे कि वैसे मंदिर बनाने से क्या हमें अंदर जाने देंगे? क्या हमारे गांव में मंदिर है? इन लोगों ने लाया क्या राम को? So there was a understanding of various kinds of contradictions that I think India is in sore need of, as I have gone on saying. People on the left who refuse to deal with the horrors of caste have lost their constituency. And people who only talk about caste but do not understand class and capitalism will also lose their way. So I think all these things are very, very important for us as people of this country to understand.
As far as the connections of Kisan Moorcha and caste are concerned, it has been discussed widely in Punjab and still needs to be discussed. And whatever you said, it is provocative enough that people will ask questions about it. Okay. So I'll let them ask the question in the question answer session. In one of the apprehensions when this movement was going on, so that this is a movement of the people who have resources, who can afford to sit over there, who can stay there for a long time. But there are people who can't. You are much more familiar with all those struggles where people are just surviving. So it's a day-to-day survival issue. So you have been to both the places, the people who are just surviving, they need to do work each and every day, and then this thing. So now you climb the tree and see what is happening.
And now the waters have also risen. If you have to use the euphemism of the dam, like all the arguments that were being raised, and are being raised even today in Bastar. What is the argument? कि आदिवासियों का जमीन लेके कॉर्पोरेट को दे रहे हैं, लेकिन वहाँ पे सबको जैसे किसान आंदोलन को कहा कि ये आतंकवादी है खालिस्तानी, वहाँ पे भी कहा कि आतंकवादी है खालिस्तानी, उनको मार दो, हम भी बन गए ना urban नक्सल ये वो सब. So the issue is now whether a bulk of the people, which is now including people who are comfortably off, let's not say very well off, but even they are going to get hammered by this new Adani Ambani type of crony capitalist privatization. Dalit people are going to get hammered by privatization, which doesn't give them any access to reservation now and so on. So the attack is also now on many more than just the poor. The attack is going to be to impoverish the middle class. And so, therefore, when you plant a tree, you see a situation, I see a situation anyway, where how is this country going to remain a democracy? When, first of all, democracy has been reduced to just elections. The constitution has more or less been set aside. Now, election machinery, and I'm not just talking about the EVM, but I'm talking about the election machinery has been captured by this ruling regime. That includes the mainstream media, that includes huge amounts of money to collect booth by booth data. It includes a huge amount of money to be the party that is able to give salaries to millions of ground workers to collect data, to manage votes, to look at voter lists, to cut off names from voter lists, all this. Most of all, to manage the propaganda machine. So, how are we going to be able to trust that we are still a democracy? And at what point are we all going to become bhai ji bhai and ask ourselves, when will you break the faith? Because if you look at the Prime Minister, every time he wins an election, a big election, जब सबको हरा के आ जाते हैं, तब भी गुस्सा है किसके ऊपर? ये आंदोलन जीवी के ऊपर. अभी क्या कहने लगा कि police should be soft on society but hard on instigators. All these intellectuals are worse than terrorists. This sort of language where even a pinhole of light you're blocking. Because you cannot stand the light. You can only live in the darkness. I don't have a problem with darkness. Maybe darkness is a good place. Then they can't stand the darkness and they only want light. Either way, they want no dissent whatsoever.
So I take you back to the Kisan Morcha again. Before the Kisan Morcha, there was COVID, of course, COVID, lockdown, and before that there were protests against CA, NCR, NRC, and before that there was application of Article 37. When all those protests were going on, although they were very robust protests and people were participating in those protests, but state was unmoved and there was no response from the state. And then this all happened. And do you think that this scenario as its own has changed or not?
Well, look, although they did not withdraw the CIA and NRC, right now they are not talking about it at all. So I don't know when they will try to start implementing it or each stages. But I think they are very aware of the fact that, and I think especially here in Punjab, people, you must be aware of the fact that whoever the government is, even if it's a government overwhelmingly popularly voted in, like Aam Aadmi Party, which is good. It's a change, it's excellent, I'm happy. But that cannot do the same work as people on protest. That cannot be confused. Those two things must never be confused together. And the attack on people, on farmers, on minorities is going to be relentless in India. Maybe not in Punjab right now, but certainly in the rest of India. So we do have to give each other solidarity. We do have to learn to stand up for each other when it isn't even only about us. Like when NRC was happening, when Shaheen Bagh was happening, I know how people from Punjab came and did langar, and that was such a beautiful thing to do. There are connections and there are worldviews that should be shared and similar and talked about, because this is a country today where the same laws do not apply to. We have the same laws, but they do not apply in the same way to everybody. So if the Kisans are blocking the road, there's a lot of force, there's a lot of killing that happens, but it's different if Muslims have decided to block the road. Immediately you can imagine what would have happened and what did happen in them.
So do you think that it has something to do with the construction of the national? Who is the national?
Yes.
Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. So you have built an image for 70 years and that image is there. So image is there as a protester. So do you think that it was something that state was just not finding the way?
I think that was really important and really good, and that did help the Andolan, and that was wonderful, But that same state has constructed so carefully the identity of Muslims as terrorists and Muslims as anti-national. So it go against them. So that's why every law that exists, depending on who you are, what's your religion, what's your ethnicity, what's your caste, what's your gender, it will be a conviction, which means a terrible thing.
What do you think about the potential of the identity of Kisan again? Can it still work, or it has exhausted the potential?
It hasn't exhausted the potential. I think that people, I read that the agitation is going to start again, and it's not. It's great.
In one of your recent interviews, you have said that now you are quite hopeful as compared to the time, I think, a couple of years ago, and now. And you have hopes that there will be resistance and people will talk about the issues. So where does that hope come from?
My DNA. I mean, it's a story that's in the door of small things, but it's a nice story. So, this is a joke that one of the characters tells another. Says there was parents who had a pair of twins, and one was an optimist and one was a pessimist. So on that birthday, the optimist, they gave him lots of presents. They gave him the watch that he wanted, and the phone that he wanted, and the clothes that he wanted, and the books that he wanted. Just gave him a lot of presents. And the pessimist, he filled his room with horse shit. And when the birthday happened, the pessimist, he opened all his presents and he grumbled. He said, but this was not the cycle that I wanted, and I don't like the color of this shirt, and why did you give me this, and grumbled a lot. Then they went to the optimist twin's room, and he was digging through the shit. So they said, what are you doing? He said, well, if there's so much shit, there must be a pony somewhere. So, yeah, all this has a shelf life. And as I said, I can see the language on the street changing. I can see a pushback. Unfortunately, the machinery is stacked against us now. And so, when will that time come when the games are so blatant that from pressing for a peaceful regime change, people will realize that something very bad is happening and it needs to be almost like a Azadi Ka Ladai. I don't know. I don't think we have come to that place yet, but I certainly think that there's a lot of unease. If you saw Akhil Bharatiya's tweets recently, if you follow closely how the counting happened and the games that were played in the UP election, nobody, journalists like you, the UP people who, गली गली का खबर है उनके पास, nobody expected this, and that is not because they are fools. That is because some very dirty games were played.
आप पिछले 50 जितने देर से लिख रही हैं, you have written regularly about Kashmir, whether it is fiction or non-fiction. So before we open up the question answer session, I assume that there will be a question about Kashmir. So would you like to say something about Kashmir after that?
I would really like to say that in my novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, Daljeet, which you translated into Punjabi, you read as well, there's a conversation between Musa Yasri, who's a Kashmiri, and Biplab Dakota, who's an Indian intelligence officer. And Musa tells him, you're not destroying us, you're constructing us. It's yourself that you are destroying. And that is what I feel about Kashmir, that when we allow this kind of untruth, this kind of oppression, this kind of wrong done to people, locking up 7 million people without internet, stitched down with razor wire, oppressed by like every breath that is taken goes through some army camp. Ultimately, as slowly we are seeing that happening to us. So there will be this moral corrosion has to be addressed in some way. That's what I want to say about this.
You wrote that in 2016. A lot has happened after that. So is there some change in your understanding about Kashmir or ideas about Kashmir?
There's no change. I mean, I've written after that too. I've written not fiction but non-fiction after the abrogation of section 2000, section 370. Not really. I mean, it's a long essay. As we know, Kashmir is such a complex subject. So what happens is people, that's why I like to write, because people are going to pick out things and then start thinking on it and do it, But I would say that I have written extensively about Kashmir, and there's nothing I've written that I am even remotely regretful about.
So now it's the time for the audience. If you have questions, you can ask. Just raise your hand and somebody will bring the mic to you and Arundhati will respond.
Can you comment on the Kashmir files? Ma'am, do you comment on the Kashmir files?
Who? I haven't seen that film, so it's really difficult to comment. So it's the first film that the Indian Prime Minister is giving, and he's one of the producers of.
Arundhati Roy.
Yes, where are you?
I'm here.
Okay.
In the dark.
Nice to that.
This is Professor Ranjit Kumar. I can.
Ranjit Kumar. I've been on the faculty of this university for quite some time. It's always a treat to listen to you.
Thank you.
And I had a couple of opportunities to listen to you earlier. And I have been your keen reader also, starting from God of Small Things. So, your writings have been piercingly depicting the ground realities, have been provocative, and whatnot. I wonder if you could kindly dwell on Bhaiji Bhaiji is the question you asked to Bhaiji Bhaiji. आपको गुस्सा कब आए? I wonder if you could develop on that. What are the forces or constraints in India which are debarring the people from rising up against the injustice every day in every walk of life, whether it is social, economic, political, cultural, everyone. I wonder if you could develop on that. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Thank you for that question, Professor. To be honest, if I were to answer that in one word, that word would be caste. Because caste is something that has divided up this society and has created and institutionalized a form of hierarchical thinking, institutionalized injustice, and has made everybody participate in it. So it's like an incredible invention of how to make an obedient population by co-opting everybody into the processes of injustice. So I really believe that this is one of the key issues for why Indian society is seen as being so passive, as being seen as being so accepting of what is being done because someone below you is suffering a little more. You can oppress the person below you a little bit more. I mean, for all the radical and wonderful political talk I heard on the streets of UP, I also heard medieval conversation, and all of it had to do with caste. And if you notice, our mainstream TV commentators, when there's an election, every one of them is a scholar of caste. And the minute the election is over, caste doesn't exist. But if you look at, जैसे मान लो कि हमारा प्रधानमंत्री परिवारवाद के खिलाफ है, लेकिन अंबानी, अडानी, टाटा, मित्तल ये सब परिवारवाद नहीं है क्या? और हम लोग हमेशा मतलब दलित स्टडीज के बारे में या जो ओप्रेस्ड लोगों के बारे में बात करना करते हैं, जो करना भी चाहिए. हमें पता है कि how many millions of people are still involved with manual scavenging. हमें पता है कि 99% of the people working in. Why don't we look at the caste of these huge corporate families? They also all belong to a particular caste. A very minor, I mean, in terms of numbers, a very small number of people who control the economy of this country. So, I will answer your question by saying this kind of elaborate structure of oppression and rule has not been invented anywhere else. And capitalism and caste have merged to form an incredible alchemy in this country, which we all like to pretend acha wo nahi raha, lekin hai. If you look at who are the largest castes in Punjab, you will also get the answer to that. Where do I place religion? Well, as we know, caste that is practiced in India in terms of how it originates is from Hinduism. But every religion, whether it's Sikhism, whether it's Islam or Christianity, have imported caste into themselves and they continue to practice it. So we can't pretend that that doesn't happen. I mean, my mother is a Christian, a Syrian Christian from Kerala, but the Syrian Christians are so casteist, I can't even listen to the way they talk in Kerala, you know. As you know, it's the same here and it's the same among Muslims. But obviously they are not the progenitors of caste, they have imported it.
नमस्ते मैम. मैं क्वेश्चन को पूरा करता हूँ. मानता हूँ आपने कश्मीर फाइल ही देखी, आपने 1990 से लेकर 2000 तक का कश्मीर को देखा होगा. चलो हमने नहीं देखा, आप उस पर तो कमेंट कर सकते हैं.
मैंने इस सवाल का जवाब ये दिया था कि मैंने कश्मीर के बारे में बहुत कुछ लिखा है, फिक्शन भी लिखा है, नॉन फिक्शन भी लिखा है. और अगर आप जानना चाहेंगे कि मैं कश्मीर के बारे में क्या सोचती हूँ तो आप पढ़ लीजिए, यही मैंने कहा.
Hello ma'am, I still can't believe you're in my city, so it's obviously a pleasure to have you. I'm a lawyer, I graduated last year, so my question is actually twofold. First, as a youth of the country, I would like to ask that you've been someone who's been involved in massive mass social movements, be it social justice or environment, and I've seen documentaries and that's really motivated me to be actively involved in the farmers movement. And farmers movement was a movement and a historical battle that gave all of us a chance to come out of our houses and be at the forefront with the Annadata of this country. So I want to know that why is somehow there is a lacking on the part of the youth, even when we have social media at our disposal, even if we have the power of exposure and different technological advancements at our disposal, there is somehow so much of divisiveness and polarization that exists amongst ourselves, let alone fighting for a common ground. My second question, the second branch of my question is as a lawyer. You said that the constitution is being set aside. Before becoming a licensed attorney, we all swear on the constitution to protect it. So it rather comes across as a shock to me to learn about the the structures crumbling down, and the laws being dispensations of the market. I want to know how, in your eyes, is the constitution being set aside from different standpoints? Thank you.
So the question of the social media creating a great amount of divisiveness, well, it's also been used, including by the farmers' movement, to create solidarity. But if you actually go into any depth on how people like Facebook and Instagram and other social media portals work, you will see that they have developed algorithms which usher people into what are known as their comfort zones. They keep on luring you into a space, and then the walls grow, and you can't. You begin to think that is the universe, and you can't communicate across those barriers. So there's something that young people ought to know about, and the existence of these echo chambers is something that is a really very disturbing fact, which people have to learn how to navigate and not get drawn into. The second question about the constitution. You see, today let's not be in any doubt that India is ruled and run by the RSS. The BJP is a functionary of the RSS. The Prime Minister has always, through his adult life, been a member of the RSS. The RSS has openly said that it doesn't believe in wanting India to be declared a Hindu nation. So that is a fundamental departure from the constitution. Now, instead of just formally setting it aside, you work to undo every little institution, every little stitch, every little hinge that keeps this country, for all its hypocrisies or whatever it is, as secular. Because the minute you say that India is a Hindu nation, the minute you try to say, this one language, one religion, one culture, that's the end of India. That's the end of India. Because India is a social contract. There is not a single person in this country who, by way of language, religion, caste, ethnicity, does not belong to some kind of minority. All of us belong to some kind of minority. And once you start unraveling this tapestry, there will be nothing left of it. So we may have as many criticisms. I do have many criticisms of what is genuinely pseudo-secularism practiced by the Congress Party in India. But once we lose even that hypocrisy, we have nothing. There's nothing left. There's no constitution, there's no democracy, and perhaps there's no country in a while.
Dr. Milan, yeah, of course. Yeah. You have written, you have seen also the situation in Kashmir. Punjab also is likely to be a general situation. Do you think that at some future point of time, Punjab will have to face that kind of a situation as is being practiced in Kashmir?
Just let me know if I am translating you correctly. So he's asking the way things are being handled. Can Punjab go Kashmir state? So similar situation kind of as here vis-a-vis the state. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, yes.
I think that, first of all, Punjab has already seen so much horror, and there must be so many similar stories in Punjab as there are in rural Kashmir. Although we know that the motivations and the reasons for how the trouble started in Punjab are very, very different from what happened in Kashmir. But I think that one thing for us to remember is that there hasn't been really a race since independence when the Indian security forces have not been sort of deployed against quote unquote our own people. Not a single day, you know. So as I said, without this formal declaration of Hindu nation, there was enough trouble. But if you're going to start hammering through an agenda, if you're going to do it through misinformation, through media management, through money, through dishonest play during elections, through capturing every democratic institution which is supposed to serve as a check against other things. Because democracy without a constitution doesn't mean anything. It cannot be a democracy. Then it can become only a majority, a majoritarian state. And as I said, we don't have a majority. So the attempt to construct that majority is also an act of great violence. So,
inflicting on people who are politically there, there's a majority.
So you see you see the violence. Like you look at a place like UP, you have a state where the figures of the numbers of children that are malnutrition, the numbers of women that have anemia, the levels of education, the levels of healthcare are among the worst in the world.
So that kind of
and
how do you bring that kind of capitalization to this agenda?
So you create a narrative in which none of this matters as much as your identity, your national identity, your religious identity, and then you perpetuate this kind of poverty, this kind of lack of education. Just say Kerala, where I come from, the BJP tried to get involved in the elections. It tried to create a lot of religious issues over Shabarimala and all this. After the elections, the best SMS that I've ever received in my life was from my sister-in-law. She said BJP equals Ana Mota. That is in Malayalam, the word for elephant ka anda, hathi ka anda. And the guys who were trying this in Kerala, they said कि यहाँ पे क्या है, लोग पढ़े लिखे हैं, तो हमारा टाइम वेस्ट हो रहा है. चलो. So, to keep people deprived, to keep people in a state of extreme vulnerability, and a very interesting thing, to keep people, look, this is a very interesting thing that we all should be very aware of, which is when you create this sarkar do char log chalate do khareedte do beechme. So this model of corporate liberalism, corporate capitalism, is going to create a situation of extreme unemployment. It's happening here. I mean, people think about Punjab as the richest state in the world, but you know the real story, right? Now, in UP, jo berozgari tha, it's a huge issue. But you go there and in the name of corona or whatever, you're like providing 5 kilo chawal, 2 kilo chini and all this. If you think of when the NREGA started, at that point, while it was a great scheme, I was very uncomfortable because I realized that it is the government equivalent of corporate social responsibility. कि लोगों को हम कंगाल बनाने वाले हैं, तो कुछ तो दे दो. Let's not talk about the structures that are creating poverty. Let's just mitigate it. Very important. But now NREGA is reduced to हम राशन पहुंचाएंगे, and people who are so destroyed are grateful for ration. That's why that Bhaiji Bhai passage was so important. We live where you dump our belongings, we breathe the air that you give us to breathe, and we'll vote for you even though we know what you're doing to us.
Hello, Roy. Now my question is simple, and that has again to do with the election system. See, as the world finance capital is like gripping each and every sector, and in the recent election, the way microfinance companies have played a major role, and especially in UP and Punjab. So, a kind of party comes with less than 40% vote, they will rule the whole country. What is your take on election reforms? Because I haven't read it from you saying something about electoral reforms. May it be a proportional one or any other one, so that people of those people have voted for, they may represent the people. So what's your take on this?
So I haven't actually written about it, but I think it's a very, very important subject for us to all pay attention to. For many years now, even after abrogation of Section 370, there have not been elections in Bengal, in Kashmir, because they are working on what they call delimitation, changing constituencies, and it will be changed in order to make sure that Kashmir, the government in Kashmir will not be controlled by people of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. Even though the population in Kashmir is much denser than it is in Jammu. But in other states, it's exactly the opposite. Like you are going to see delimitation, let's say increasing the numbers of states in the constituencies and seats in the government at the cost of states like Tamil Nadu or Kerala, so who have less population because they have development and progress more than other states. And so you will come, which is why you will come to a situation where you keep a certain section of people deprived, you keep a certain section of people malnourished, living off ration, without access to healthcare and education, but voting for you. But those numbers will make enough for you to rule the country. And so this is something very, very important that we have to watch out. And you say 40%. In truth, it's much less than that, because of the first past the post system, you're actually creating huge majorities with 20% of the vote.
My question, I have two questions. First question is how you see the incident of 26th January, hosting a flag, a religious Sikh flag as well as a former flag on the Red Fort on one side, and later after some period, RSS flag was posted on some kind of, it was I think High Court of some place. That's my one question. My another question is, you said what I have observed, the problem in Kashmir and the problem in Punjab started with the fake promises. The promise in Kashmir was that we will have a plebiscite after conditions are there. And in Punjab, 6 were promised that we will give you a federal structure. And this whole story started from there. In 1947, we find a declaration where a circular where 6 said a criminal tribe. The fake promises made by the Nehru regime of that government. Now, this question is another part. In Kashmir, we find that there is JKLF who supports for independence, and there's a Hurriyat led by Gilani Pass. He was a pro-Pakistani. So people are in dilemma in Kashmir, and how you describe their dilemma? Thank you.
So, as I said, these subjects are things which I write about, and I don't want to speak, 3 sentences and have them become a substance of my way of thinking, because these are very deep and hard and controversial things. I'll just say 2 things. One is that I do feel that the only solution to a kind of peaceful, prospering India is federalism for everybody. Federalism for everybody, for every state, and that's the exact opposite of what is going on now. And regarding what happened on the 26th of January, see, I think that when we all stand up against this government is waiting for somebody to do something that it can pounce on and destroy and break. So, I hope that from that, whether it was right or wrong, I'm not going to comment on, but I'm saying we must never give them the opportunity to move in like they did that time. They would have moved in anyway, but we must never give that opportunity. You have to be very careful how you. That's a high wire act that is going on at that time, But I just end by saying that my my respect and thanks to the farmers' movement go way beyond the farm laws.
Ma'am, I'm Road for Tony Bakka.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I have been teaching in the army schools for the last 20 years, and now the recent I have noticed in in the month of December, जो 8/7 आर्मी वेलफेयर एजुकेशन सोसाइटी है, उस स्कूल्स को रन करती है. अराउंड 140 स्कूल्स हैं सारे इंडिया में. तो उन्होंने क्या वहाँ से एक लेटर आया था कि रीजनल लैंग्वेज नहीं पढ़ाई जाएगी. एक्चुअली 6th क्लास ऑनवर्ड्स जो न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसी है और पुरानी एजुकेशन पॉलिसी के अनुसार भी वो लैंग्वेज पढ़ाते थे, रीजनल लैंग्वेज पढ़ाते थे. जो रीजनल लैंग्वेज है वहाँ की, पंजाब में स्कूल है तो पंजाबी पढ़ाएंगे. उन्होंने कहा कि हम ना हिंदोजीनस हमने करना है सारा जो हमारा है, तो हम ना इसको करेंगे, हम तो संस्कृत पढ़ाएंगे थर्ड लैंग्वेज. तो इससे क्या है, पंजाब में अराउंड 4000 बच्चे हैं जो जवान के बच्चे हैं जो पंजाबी हैं, जो पंजाबी पढ़ते हैं. 14 स्कूल से 14 स्कूल हैं आर्मी स्कूल. तो सर मैम पेरेंट्स में से कॉन्टेक्ट किया तो मैंने क्या कहा, एक लेटर लिखी उनको और साइन करवा के वहाँ भेजी. और उससे पहले न्यूज़पेपर में बताया थोड़ा, तो ये रेस हो गया, तो ये रुक गया. 21 साल के रुक गया मैम. इस साल वो पढ़ाएंगे पंजाबी, बट रीजनल लैंग्वेज जो है जो वर्नाकुलर लैंग्वेज है उनको भी बहुत खतरा है डिजाइन में. तो इसके बारे में भी कुछ कहेंगे?
देखिए, मैं सिर्फ ये कहूँगी कि आप हिस्टोरिकली देखेंगे तो लैंग्वेज हैज अ वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट रोल टू प्ले इन हाउ countries get destabilized and how things happen. If you see what was the final reason for the uprising in Bangladesh, which is now Bangladesh, which was then East Pakistan, when they stopped allowing the teaching of Bangla. The same thing happened in Sri Lanka when they tried to stop Tamil populations from learning Tamil. The same thing has happened in India before, as we know, with all the language agitations. So यही तो मैं कह रही हूँ बार बार कि अगर आप ये हिंदुस्तान चलाएंगे तो फिर कुछ नहीं रहेगा. और ये बात छोड़ दो कि ये तीनों शब्द फारसी से आए हैं. वो बात
Mike.
सर प्लीज सहायता कर दो, पंजाबी जी बोल रहे हैं. सर एक ना मैडम ने पिछले दिनी ਕਰਨ ਥਾਪਰ ਨਾਲ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਜੀ, ਕੋਚ ਮੈਮ ਨੇ ਬਲਕਾਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀ ਆ. ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਮ ਦਾ ਉੱਤੇ ਕਮੈਂਟ ਲੈ ਲਿਓ ਜੀ. ਦੂਜਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਮ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੀ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਨੇ, ਬੇਸਿਕ ਇੰਟਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਪਈ ਆ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟਸਲ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਸਟੇਜ ਤੇ.
So he's asking that in your recent interview with Karan Thapa, you talked about balkanization, and he wants you to comment on that. And the second question is, where is the basic contradiction that is going on between the state and the center? All the states that you federation.
नहीं, balkanization I've already spoken about. ये तो मैंने पहले से कहा कि अगर आप इतना टाइट खींचेंगे और पूरा सेंट्रलाइज करेंगे तो एंड में वो सारा टूट ही जाएगा. और जो टेंशन है स्टेट और सेंटर के बीच में, अगर ऑब्वियसली जो बीजेपी रूल्ड स्टेट है वो उनका पूरा एक रिलेशनशिप अलग है, लेकिन बाकी सबको मतलब इकोनॉमिकली लो या जीएसटी से लो या फार्मर लॉ से लो, जो सारा स्टेट सब्जेक्ट होना चाहिए उनको तो आपने सेंट्रली डिसीजन लेके बिल पास किया, ये किया. एक पूरा तानाशाही जैसे चल रहा है. और कितना टाइम के लिए लोग ये भुगतेंगे, कितना टाइम के लिए लोग कहेंगे कि चलो ठीक है. अब आप इसीलिए, क्योंकि ये अनरेस्ट है, ये डिस्कम्फर्ट है, इसीलिए आप हर किस्म का डिसेंट को बंद करना चाह रहे हैं. मतलब जब यूएपीए का लॉ अमेंड हुआ तो अमित शाह ने पार्लियामेंट में क्या बोला कि ये टेररिस्ट सब मतलब इंटेलेक्चुअल से ज़्यादा खतरा है. मतलब ऑर्गेनाइजेशन सिर्फ नहीं, सिर्फ इवन इंडिविजुअल्स विल कम अंडर यूएपीए. And then you create a situation where a BJP man can come on the streets of Delhi and say, देश के गद्दारों को गोली मारो सालों को, और आप उनको या जो भी लिंच करते हैं, जो भी मर्डर करते हैं, जो भी मैसेकर करते हैं, उनको आप मंत्री बनाएंगे, MP बनाएंगे, ये सब करेंगे। और जो जैसे उमर खालिद है, जो स्पीच में खुलेआम वो प्यार के बारे में बोल रहा था, उनका कहना नहीं, एक्चुअली वो सीक्रेटली कुछ और बोल रहा था। जो यति नरसिम्हन जाके ओपनली जेनोसाइड का कॉल दे रही थी। तो यही है कि आप कितने देर के लिए चलाएंगे, कितने देर के लिए चलाएंगे, और फिर कितने लोगों को आप मारेंगे, लिंच करेंगे, अंदर करेंगे, ट्रायल करेंगे। लेकिन it's so sad because this could have been a beautiful experiment. This country could have been a beautiful thing. We have so many things wrong, but we have so many things right. Maybe we are destroying everything. And with that, I would like to end with a reading.
So you want to last question?
One question.
No. You can ask.
Ranjit, I have been asking for two questions for very long.
One is by Professor Multani and then Professor Chamana. And you can ask thereafter. So now the time is over. So please, Professor Multani, please ask the question.
It's my humble request.
Yeah.
It's my humble request.
Or you ask
the three questions, let them be asked.
So
let him
ask your question.
Let him, yeah.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੁਣ ਲਿਆ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ
Mike, sure.
With due respect to all questions put forth to man by all audience of politics and something else, I think the sphere to which man belongs is writing. And being a student of language, I have few questions to you, ma'am. Who was your ideal as far as writing career is concerned? And give some tips for beginners. Go ahead.
बड़ी माइक पे जी।
This is regarding your latest novel, that is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. As we all know that it revolves around the complicated life of transgenders. So I just want to know about your observation that after writing that novel, is there any change in the people's mindset? What is your observation regarding this particular group of people?
The last question by Professor Samala.
Currently, I am just wondering about posters. All of us, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are very much protective of this constitution. But about this one constitution, Dr. Utkar is giving a private of in our medical system, and very not to something else. But Dr. Ambedkar himself had on this time of 47 or 49, that I would be the first person to burn this constitution. Because I have drafted this constitution under certain compulsions, under class compulsions. It's the feudal classes and bureaucracy which had compelled me to draft this constitution. Secondly, all British colonial type laws, like sedition, like hurting, like people like that, under which all freedom fighters have been. One of our Punjabi poets has to leave this country because he, in his poetry, called Nanak as his close friend, Mera Yaar. He was charged in 225 and he has to escape. He has to escape he's not, but he's on this. Now, then, this very constitution, which is considered to be secular, the core, how can a religiously robed person can hold a constitution piece? There is no resolution. There is no Supreme Court. How you take the oath of your highest constitutional court? Tomorrow, just no, let me come. I am 2024. Another religiously robed person would be the Prime Minister of India. And he will take oath like that. There remain the difference between a Hindu nation under this constitution. Don't you? Yes.
So let me just address the first concern, the last question first. If you read a long essay or a short book that I wrote called Doctor and the Saint, where I talk about how the Constitution was written, what were the constraints, and what was Baba Sahib Ambedkar's concerns after he wrote it. And even apart from everything else, he said the Constitution is a living document. It should be changed, it should be argued over, it's not a Bible, it doesn't have to be worshipped. So that is how jurisprudence and states should evolve. Obviously, as I said, regarding the fact that people in saffron robes are reading, are occupying public office, are taking oaths on the Constitution while denying Muslim girls the right to a hijab in school, is all a part of setting aside the Constitution without doing so formally, just assuming that it doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. So again, at what point are we going to say that's enough? That is one. The second, the middle question about the Ministry of Utmost Happiness. You see, the novels are not thermometers, like I can't dip it into a community and say, how has my novel affected your attitude? That's not possible, but the fact is that utmost happiness is about the fact of complex identities. And the world is evolving towards simplifying identities. One side of the world is evolving towards simplifying identities, flattening identities, trying to make them into placards. Whereas if you look at, if you read the book, you remember that Anjum, who is a trans woman, she is also a Shia Muslim born in Old Delhi, and at some point she gets caught up in the 2002 massacre in Gujarat. She comes back and she's unable to live her old life in the Kabga with her other friends, and she moves into a graveyard where she will get found. And in her case, you see that what was her more dangerous identity? For her in her life, she was actually in danger in that massacre because she was a Muslim. And it was the fact that she was transgender that saved her, because the murderer said, "Hijron ko marna ab shagun hota hai," So to save themselves from bad luck, they let her go. So in the same way, in the novel, almost every character has some kind of border running through them, whether it's gender, whether it's religion, whether it's nation, whether it's whatever it is. So it's a book about the fact that you cannot flatten people's identities, and that is, as the gentleman here asked the question, ultimately, to be honest, that is what brings me joy as a writer. Like it isn't necessarily just being this political commentator talking about elections and constitution. All of that I do, but ultimately I am a novelist, and I am somebody who who loves language and who plays with language and who fears the fact that increasingly the world has become so judgmental, so small, so narrow, you can't even navigate small, everything is becoming so humorless in some ways and policed. But well, the only tip that I can give potential writers is that I have no tips. I can't give you advice. All I can tell you is, like the one time when I started writing, I tried to read a book which was telling me about the craft of novel writing, and it's the only book I ever tore up and threw across the floor and said, I have to make my own rules. So that's answer to that. And I'd like to end by reading you a small passage from an essay that I wrote called The End of Imagination, soon after the nuclear tests happened. And this is not about, this passage is not about the nuclear test. It's more about, almost about the manifesto of a writer. So, I'm talking about this test happening while I was, it happened just very soon after the Goddess Motif came out, and I won the Booker Prize, and I was very embarrassed of being paraded as this item of national pride, and like people were more interested in the prize than in the book, and I was not naturally someone who lends myself to this kind of stuff. So, so this part of this essay about a friend who I'm talking to in New York. And I told my friend that there was no such thing as a perfect story. I said, in any case, hers was an external view of things. This assumption that the trajectory of a person's happiness, or let's say fulfillment, had peaked and now must trough because she had accidentally stumbled upon success. It was premised on the unimaginative belief that wealth and fame were the mandatory stuff of everybody's dreams. You've lived too long in New York, I told her. There are other worlds, other kinds of dreams. Dreams in which failure is feasible, honorable, sometimes even worth striving for. Worlds in which recognition is not the only barometer of brilliance or human worth. There are plenty of warriors who I know and love, people far more valuable than myself, who go to war each day knowing in advance that they will fail. True, they are less successful in the most vulgar sense of the word, but by no means less fulfilling. The only dream worth having, I told her, is to dream that you will live while you're alive and die only when you're dead. Which means exactly what? She asked, arched eyebrows, a little annoyed. I tried to explain, but didn't do a very good job of it. Because sometimes I need to write to think. So I wrote it down for her on a paper napkin. And this is what I wrote. To love, to be loved, to never forget your own insignificance, to never get used to the unspeakable violence and the vulgar disparity of life around you, to seek joy in the saddest places, to pursue beauty to its lair, to never simplify what is complicated or complicate what is simple, to respect strength, never power, above all to watch, to try and understand, to never look away, and never, never to forget. Thank you.
Yeah, with this, I thank Arundhati Roy for coming all the way, taking time, and responding to all the questions. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be up here. And बाद ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ
ਇਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਫੇਰ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਆਏ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਕਰਨਾਟਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਵਾਲੀ ਘਟਨਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਰੇਖਾ ਤੇ ਡਾਕੇ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਟਰਾਈ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੱਕਾ ਆਪਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਸਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਮੰਨਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੇਸੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ
I think as an organizer, I want to state it categorically clear here that violence in any form is condemnable. So whosoever is doing it, it's condemnable. And I thank you all the questions and making this event successful. Thanks a lot. Now,
Thank you.